So my name is Paige. I'm Senator Romney's Deputy Communications Director. Thank you guys all for joining our press call on the debt ceiling negotiations. As we normally run these things, I'm going to kick it off to Senator Romney for some introductory remarks, and then I'll go through and call on you all to ask questions. So Senator Romney.
Thank you, Paige, and thanks for those that are joining. The legislation to raise the debt ceiling, I will be voting for, along with the members of the House from Utah, who on a united basis voted for this legislation as well. The reason I'm voting for it is pretty straightforward. It's better than the alternatives. It's not perfect. It has flaws. There are lots of ways it could be better, but in a government that is part Democrat and part Republican, it is a compromise that's better than the alternatives. The alternatives were one of two things. Excuse me. Number one, we could have defaulted on the debt, but that's not an answer. That's just the next step, because then what happens after that? Number two, we could have had a so-called clean debt ceiling increase. That wouldn't be ideal either. Number three, we got some things that we were hoping to get, and Speaker McCarthy was able to accomplish a number of objectives. And you know what those are. One is the largest spending reduction in American history. That's an accomplishment. Number two, as you know, is that there are some permitting reforms. Are they better than what was there before? Yes. Are they perfect? No. Is there more that should be done? Absolutely. But it's a step forward. There's going to be light shed on presidential regulations and how much they cost. And again, that's a step forward. So that's the reason I'm going to be supporting the bill. I would note that we all decided that we wanted to have one person in the room where it happened, and that was Kevin McCarthy. We unanimously stood behind him and asked him to negotiate on our behalf. He did. I know there's some people who are frustrated that they think they could have done a better job in the room where it happens. Well, first of all, you got to get elected to that job. And Kevin McCarthy did get elected to that job by his colleagues in the House. And two, he did a very sound job. Perfect? No. Better than I could have done? Almost certainly. And better than most of the people who don't like the bill? Absolutely. I would note, as you probably know, that in Congress and in the Senate and in politics generally, there are people who want to make a noise, and there are people who want to make law. And you'll hear from people who want to make noise and will express anger and frustration at something that they don't think is perfect. But there are others who want to make law and want to vote for something that they think is an improvement. I'll mention one more thing, and that is this, which is there are a number of things that I don't like about the bill. I don't like the fact that it's capping military spending, even though it's an increase in military spending over the prior year. It's not as much as I'd like to spend. I think there are ways of remedying that with supplemental bills down the road. But I would note this about the saving total, which is roughly 1.5 trillion over a 10-year period. And that is this. The Democratic Party and the Republican Party leadership, meaning the current president and the former president, Donald Trump, have both said they're not willing to touch entitlements, Medicare, Social Security, and so forth. That's 2/3 of federal spending that the negotiators weren't able to touch. Then there's another 1/6, which is roughly the defense portion, and that's something which we actually increased. So the only portion that we were able to reduce, or that Kevin McCarthy was able to reduce, is 1/6. And to be able to save 1.5 trillion without touching 5/6 of our spending is actually quite an accomplishment. I would note that if we're ever going to deal with the real math here, which is the fact that we're adding more debt every year because of the deficits, we're only going to have to, we can only do that if we're at the same time raising military spending. We can't raise military spending, not touch entitlements, and reduce the deficit unless we finally take a look at entitlements and find a way either to get more revenue, that means more tax revenue, or to reduce the cost. That's the only option. And I filed a piece of legislation called the Trust Act, which is designed to have a bipartisan commission look at each of the entitlements and find ways to get them in balance. Because until we get the entitlements in balance, the math does not add up. We can't keep on growing the military and not raising taxes and not touching entitlements and expect somehow that we're going to be able to reduce the amount of debt in our country. So with that as an introduction, I will turn to you for any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Senator. I'll start with Brian Schott with the Trib.
Hey, Brian.
Hello, Senator. To play off of your reference to Hamilton and being in the room where it happens, in the effort to get to yes, are you satisfied with the pieces that were sacrificed in this game of chess?
Well, in each case, we got something. I think it's fair to say, as has been stated by others, the Democrats didn't get anything. They wanted to raise the debt ceiling. We wanted to raise the debt ceiling. All right, we were not going to default on the government debt. So we both wanted that, and then we wanted a bunch of other things, and we got a bunch of other things. Did we get as much as we wanted? Well, of course not. That's the nature of a compromise between a government which has one House that's barely Republican, a 4-person majority, that's the House, and then a Senate and Senate and presidency that are Democrat. So did we get a number of things on those fronts? Yes. Is it an advance for our priorities? Yes. Are the Democrats happy? No. They didn't want to negotiate at all. As you know, the president stonewalled this for 3 months. But we held firm. We stood behind Speaker McCarthy, and he delivered a substantial improvement over what we would have had otherwise.
Quick follow-up. It seems like both sides got things out of this. What do you make of the perception coming from some of the Republicans in the House that they got played, that they didn't get anything, that this was a disaster for them?
Well, a disaster would, of course, been a default on our national debt and not sending out Social Security checks to people in the country. That was a disaster scenario. And this is a big improvement on that because there are a number of elements where we did have some victories. I mean, how you could ignore the fact that it's the biggest reduction in government spending in the history of the country is beyond me. That's a very big accomplishment. And at the same time, increasing military spending. So we increased military spending, which is a high priority for us, and at the same time, dramatically reduced spending on non-military domestic non-military domestic items. So is it a victory? Yes. Is it as much of a victory as we would have liked had we had the House, the Senate, and the White House? No. But it's an advance without question. And do we score a touchdown and are we celebrating in the end zone? Of course not. Look, this isn't Christmas. The opposition party is not going to give us everything we want. But Speaker McCarthy was able to accomplish a great deal. And by the way, probably the most underestimated man in Washington, D.C. Is Speaker McCarthy. We were surprised when he was able to become Speaker. We were surprised when he got the House to vote in favor of a debt ceiling bill in the first place. And we were surprised last night when he got 147 Republican votes, 2/3 of the Republican votes in the House in favor of the deal he put together. It's really, really quite an accomplishment.
Okay, Suzanne.
Great, thanks. Hi, Senator Romney. I just wanted to ask you, a lot of people have said that government spending is one of the causes of inflation and the pressure that it's putting on American families. Do you think that this bill goes far enough to reverse that, to stop that? I think families are looking for some relief. Does this go far enough?
Yeah, no, the bill does not go as far as I would like it to go. It just scratches the surface of what we need to do in spending. But unfortunately, as you know, 2/3 of federal spending is automatic, is not voted on. 2/3 of federal spending is entitlements, Medicare, Social Security, and Medicaid being the 3 biggest. We don't get to vote on those. They're locked in. And until we finally look at those programs and vote on them and make sure they're solvent, meaning that they take in as much money as they send out, then we're going to continue to stimulate, if you will, inflation. Now, the real cause of inflation was initially, of course, COVID and the crisis that caused, but then the Democrats, I love them, but they spent $1.9 trillion as soon as Biden came into office. $1.9 trillion. They spent it entirely on their own, and that is the cause of the persistent inflation you're seeing now. So yeah, Government spending was it. It's caused the inflation. It's going to be hard to put the brakes on it. There's an effort to do that, but we have a lot more work to do.
Box 13. Fox 13, if you wanted to unmute and ask your question. Okay, I'll come back to you. Bridger with KSL.
Thanks. Hi, Senator.
Hi, Richard.
So I know Utah's other senator, Mike Lee, has been leading an effort to ask for even more changes to the bill. Got a bunch of senators to sign on. I wonder what the prospects are for that bill coming up for a vote in the Senate, and whether or not there are enough Republicans on board with the bill as it's currently written to pass it this week.
Well, there's no question there'll be quite a few amendments to improve the bill. I predict that every Republican, including myself, will vote for all these amendments, and that every Democrat will vote against them, and not one of them will succeed. And that's again, that's a question about making noise versus making law. A deal has been worked out between Republicans and Democrats, with McCarthy and Biden working out a deal. The Democrats are not going to say, okay, let's give the Republicans some more because they want more. So yeah, we can say these things. It's very exciting to talk about them and to act as if they're critical to the future. But the reality is the amendments are not going to be adopted, almost certainly, unless Democrats sign up for them. The only way you can get an amendment to pass or a law to pass in Washington is if it's supported by Republicans and Democrats. That's the nature that of the government in our country under our constitutional system. You can't have one party dictating what happens to both parties. So amendments that come only by Republicans and for Republicans are not going to become law unless Democrats sign on. And the amendments I've seen so far are Republican amendments that Democrats won't accept.
Thanks.
Thank you.
KUTV.
Senator, good afternoon. Mike Lee has described this as a palliative pill, lopsidedly negotiated, and a bad deal for Americans. Is he wrong? And is he one of the politicians you accuse of making noise?
Well, my point of view and the point of view of the other members of the delegation, of course, is that this is a positive step. Is it as positive as I'd like it to be? No. Are there elements I'd like to see improved? Yes. That's why I'm going to vote for the amendments. All the amendments I've heard of, I will support. I wish they were part of the deal. But again, in a government where you have a House that's Republican and a Senate and White House that are Democrat, you have to find compromise. And I know that that's not popular with the base of my party, or frankly, with the base of the Democrat Party. The left wing of the Democratic Party doesn't like this bill and voted no as well. So you know, you have to. I mean, as they say, you know, politics is the art of compromise, and in this case, we stood behind Kevin McCarthy. We gave him the responsibility, and if someone thinks they can do a better job than he has done, then get yourself elected to that position so that you're in the room where it happens. But yeah,
if I may ask a follow-up, actually a hard follow-up. First, to the question, is Senator Lee making noise? And then second, you talk about entitlements, and is that code for there must be cuts in Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid?
No, I don't think anyone is suggesting that we see a cut to Medicare, Medicaid, or Social Security. The items that are spoken about with regards to those programs are, number one, increasing the retirement age, not for current retirees or people near retirement, but let's say for people in their 20s and 30s and 40s, to increase the retirement age, or perhaps to link it to life expectancy. That's one thing that's spoken about. The other is talking about raising the income upon which the tax is collected, the FICA tax is collected. That's another thing that's spoken about. So more revenue, if you will, higher taxes, if you will. Another that is spoken about is having people, again, not current retirees, but future retirees, having people of higher incomes not receiving as much Social Security or as much Medicare, and providing those programs more for people who rely on them exclusively for their, or primarily for their care. So those are things that are spoken about. I can't tell you which ones would ever be adopted, but revenues and spending are both included when you speak about them. And, you know, Senator Lee is someone who speaks from conscience and will do his best to improve the legislation. And if he's successful in getting some Democrats to vote for it, that'd be a good thing. I support his amendment. And as I've said, all the other amendments that I've heard of, I support all of them, except the one coming from Tim Kaine, who's a Democrat. He's got an amendment on a pipeline going through Virginia that he opposes. I will not support that amendment.
And in terms of those entitlement reforms that you mentioned, which do you support? Raising the retirement age, more FICA tax, which?
Bicameral commission for each one of those and work out a compromise, because no Democrat, no Republican is going to start off by saying, hey, let's increase taxes. And no Democrat's going to start off by saying, let's increase the retirement age. But what happened with, you know, some years ago, the last time we had a reform of those programs was with Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill, and they each got something. They raised the revenue and they raised the retirement age. So a compromise is probably going to include a bit of both, but I'm not going to show you my hand as to where I'd end up on a compromise. I'll start by saying, let's find a way to reduce costs.
Thanks, Brian. Okay, Tim with Standard Examiner.
Hi, Tim.
Hello, Senator. Changing the subject a little bit, anything more you can say about plans for the next election at this stage?
Oh, that's a topic for another call, I imagine, coming soon. But the reality is I'm looking to see what I've accomplished and what I can accomplish in the next term, and what I can accomplish under the new membership that we have and the leadership we have. And that's going to give me a good indication of whether it would be fruitful for me to be here or whether someone else should take a whack at it. So that's something I'll be deciding probably over the summer or the fall. I'm not in a big hurry to get there. I am doing what I've got to do to make sure that if I decide to run again, I'll win. So I'm raising money. I put together a team and keeping my option open.
Connor with ABC4. ABC4. Okay, I'll come back to you at the end. Charlie with the Cache Valley Daily. Charlie.
He's gone.
Sage with KUER.
Yeah. Hello, Senator. I'm just curious, kind of like, what's the mood of the Senate right now as all these negotiations has been going on, and where do you fall in that? Like, what's your mood? What's your mood right now?
Yeah, I'm actually quite happy and optimistic. I was very concerned originally that Kevin McCarthy would not be able to get a debt ceiling bill passed in the House, and he did. And then I was concerned that the president would stick to his guns and not agree to negotiate, in which case we would have had a default, which would have been catastrophic for the economy and for working families. And the president backed off of that, frankly, because we stood together. Then I was concerned that the negotiation wouldn't yield a result that the majority of Republicans found an improvement and acceptable. And he did. He got it done. He got the president to agree to a number of things that were high priorities for us, and got a bill in place that's better than what we would have had otherwise. And are there things I wish were different in it? Yes. Are there flaws? Absolutely. Is there opportunity to improve it down the road? Yeah, of course. But he accomplished what I think most people thought was a real long shot. And he deserves the credit that's due, and so I think the mood among most of my colleagues, both Democrat and Republican, is positive that we dodged a bullet here. And I think a lot of people are wondering, okay, how do we make sure that in the future we keep from getting close to something so dangerous as a default on our national debt and our inability to pay our bills like Social Security. That's just unthinkable.
Sam Metz with the AP.
I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, so last call for ABC4 or the Cache Valley Daily. Okay, well,
Senator,
Yeah.
you've spoken about alternatives to Social Security, things that could be considered in the future. Have you got any similar options for Medicare expenses?
Well, of course, the same options apply there. And when I talk about them, they're not necessarily things I've signed up for, but they're things people speak about. So they talk about higher revenue for Medicare or lower payments for people of higher income for Medicare. And I think for most of us, the focus on Medicare is how do we reduce the cost of healthcare more generally? And that's, of course, the big issue on Medicare, which is the high cost of prescription drugs, the high cost of defensive medicine, the high cost of lawsuits, medical lawsuits, malpractice lawsuits. There are just a number of things that relate to the very, very high cost of Medicare and Medicaid for that matter, that go beyond just revenue and for instance, the benefits paid out. So Medicare is the tougher one to deal with because it encompasses all of healthcare. And that, as you can imagine, is almost a daily consideration here. And right now in our committee that deals with healthcare, the so-called HELP committee, we're looking at prescription drugs and the cost of prescription drugs, and particularly the cost of generic drugs and how to bring that cost down, because one of the fastest growing elements of the cost of Medicare and Medicaid is the cost of prescription drugs and generic drugs in particular. So we're working on those things, but they're big topics, thorny topics, and basically, with Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security, my Trust Act says basically all options are on the table to consider. Not that we agree with them all, but we got to consider them all and see if we can't find a way to finally rein them in, such that we don't end up with a country that can't have a military and can't provide care for our seniors and our young people.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
Senator, thank you so much. And thank you guys all for joining us this afternoon. We'll send over the audio and video of this call immediately following. But thank you all, and you guys have my email if you have any follow-up questions.
Thank you. Take care, guys. Bye-bye.